This happened a year ago, and I'm still pretty shaken by this whole event. I live in the UK, and in autumn it gets dark at around 4 p.m. There was a school autumn break that week, so all the kids were at home, and that meant that my girlfriend's brother was home too. I'd been with her for a year at that point, so her family knew me pretty well, and her brother enjoyed my company. She'd recently been pretty stressed out. Her parents were going out across the country for the day, so she had to look after her brother. But I thought that I'd give her a day to herself so she can just cool off. I asked her parents if I could look after their son for the day instead, and they agreed. I came around at 8 a.m. and they let me in before they set off. My girlfriend's brother woke up about an hour later and she followed shortly afterwards. We went out for breakfast at a local cafe together and went back to her house when we were done. And once I dropped her off, I took her brother to the park. We got there at about 2 p.m. and the place was pretty packed. Eventually, the sun started going down and the place was completely empty by 4 p.m. I texted my girlfriend and told her we'd be home in a bit, and she said okay. I'm gonna be honest, I completely lost track of time. Me and her brother were having fun being the only two in the park. We were stood on top of this really tall climbing frame with a slide on it. It was almost pitch black at this point, so I was using my phone as a flashlight. A notification popped up on my screen, and it was my girlfriend asking where we were. I responded, "Oops, coming home now," and told her brother we had to go. He sighed and asked if we could go down the slide, and I said yes. Before I went down, I knew what the park looked like. There were streetlights all around it, benches everywhere, some trees, and places for the kids to play. When I came out of the slide, there was something weird. A man had appeared out of nowhere and was stood beneath one of the streetlights. He had a trench coat on and a beanie hat. I immediately got my girlfriend's brother behind me and called out to the man with a friendly, "Hi there." I got a response. He started groaning. I noticed he was swaying back and forth in the light, and he had his mouth open, drooling with a blank look in his eyes. This man made me feel really uneasy. I picked little bro up and kept checking on this guy the entire time. There was an exit on my left that led to the path back home, so I left out that way and kept checking behind me every few seconds. The guy was still stood there. The path where the guy stood merges with a big main path if you walk out through some bushes, and so does the one I walked through. I was walking down the path for about 2 minutes, periodically checking behind me, and thought I was in the clear. I wasn't. I was on a straight stretch of path with lots of streetlights when I saw him again. He was stood beneath one, looking up at it, and he was playing with something in his hands. I looked closer and realized it was a knife. I kept walking and walking, checking behind me constantly. Girlfriend's little brother was so scared he had his head tucked into my chest. I noticed that the guy seemed to be moving to new streetlights whenever I turned around. Initially, I thought it was my eyes playing tricks on me. I started counting them and realized 2 streetlights behind him had definitely turned into 5. I could faintly hear the groaning noise, and he was occasionally moaning as well. I picked up the pace a bit and turned a corner, getting into the last stretch of street before I got to my girlfriend's house. That was when I heard him behind the row of bushes. That moaning noise sounded angry, and I heard his heavy footsteps bounding down the path. The man was running. I immediately broke into a sprint and didn't stop until I turned an alleyway at the front of the street and got behind my girlfriend's house. There's a big bush there, so I crouched down behind that and spammed her phone with messages to open the back gate. I hugged her brother close until she opened it for us and got us in quickly. Being out there felt like years. I went to the front of the house and had it confirmed that I'd managed to shake him. He was now in the street, circling where I'd been, outside of the alleyway just moments ago. He was still moaning. He had that knife in his hands. He started kicking people's bins over. I called the police immediately, but he was gone by the time they arrived, and as far as I know, they never found him. There was a similar incident near the area a few months ago I saw in a local Facebook group, but I don't think anything came of that either. Her parents thanked me for keeping their son safe and didn't hold any ill will against me for the situation. He went back to normal pretty much the day afterwards, but he still has nightmares about the event. When my country isn't in lockdown, I'm still allowed to look after him with my girlfriend, funnily enough. But we haven't been to that park ever since, and I still check over my shoulder and break into a cold sweat every time I'm alone in the street. This happened to me when I was about 12 or 13 years old, so about 15 years ago, and I am a female. The town I live in has developed a lot since this story, but when this happened, there were a lot of old factories spread out with lots of land in between them. There was a Walmart being built in the area, but it had barely started construction. There was a main highway that ran through there, but my mom didn't like taking it as much as construction would get bad most of the time. The side streets we would take were desolate and not much lit. There was also little to no cars taking these streets. I can't remember where we were coming from that night, but in the car that night was my mom, my brother, who is 3 years younger than me, and myself. My mom is obviously driving. I'm in the passenger seat, and my brother is sitting behind me. My mom is the sweetest person ever, but is very adamant that she will never stop to help somebody on the side of the road, or pick somebody up, especially when her kids were in the car. She does, however, make sure she calls the police so that they can help. It was around 9 p.m. and we were going home when my mom and I spotted someone on the side of the road, by the passenger side with their hood up. Nothing out of the ordinary, as my mom slows down a little since it's dark outside and doesn't want to harm anybody that might be fixing their car. As soon as we are close to the car, this guy steps out from around the hood of the car, towards the street, and is waving us down. I don't remember much of a description because I wasn't paying too much attention, plus I could barely see the man, but I do remember feeling bad we weren't at least going to stop to see what he needed. The man at this point is in the middle of the road waving his hands, but as we come up on the car, we don't see anybody else in the car. So my mom swerves around him and tells my brother to find her phone in her purse that was in the floor between the front and back seats. I look at my mom as she looks in her rearview mirror and her face goes white and her eyes get wide. My mom slams her foot on the accelerator. This is highly unusual for my mom as she's really good at going the speed limit. At this point, I know something is wrong. My mom's voice goes high and in a panicked voice is asking my brother where her phone is. I'm yelling at her, "What's going on?" All this chaos is freaking my brother out, and with him being so little is crying and can't find the phone. My mom keeps her eyes on the road but keeps glancing up continuously at her rearview mirror and finally answers, "He's following us." I'm not exactly sure what she's talking about, but know that this isn't a good situation. My mom is speeding towards the highway and thank goodness there is no traffic. I look in the back window and see somebody passing cars trying to keep up with my mom. I ask her where she's going and she tells me she's heading to the police station. As we're getting close, my mom tells me to jump out of the car as soon as she stops the car and grab my brother from the back seat, while she runs around the car to meet us. My mom stops right in front of the police station and doesn't even wait for the car to fully come to a stop before she puts the car in park. I open my car door as fast as I can and grab my brother, who has quickly opened his door. I take off in a full sprint with my brother in one hand and my mom on the other hand. Once we finally talk to a police officer is when I finally understand the full extent of what had happened. My mom told the police officer that once we passed the guy with the broke down car, he quickly ran to the hood of his car and slammed it. He then got into his car and sped after us. That was when my mom knew this guy had horrible intentions for us. She said he kept trying to speed up to get on the side of us, but she was able to speed up to avoid that. Once my mom turned toward the police station, she said the guy had stopped following her, but she still wanted to get to the police station in case he changed his mind. She gave a good description of the guy in his car, but because everything happened so fast, she didn't get a license plate number. I'm pretty sure the police never found him. I'm also not sure what that guy had planned for us if we had actually stopped to help, but I know it was nothing good. To the guy that faked his car being broke down on an empty street, let's not ever meet again. I lived in a pretty nice area with my husband and some family friends. We lived there for a few years with nothing bad happening around us. It felt like a very safe neighborhood. Now, for context, I'm a very short white female, and I'm considered disabled even though I look fine. But I could never really beat anyone up since my disability has limited my activity severely. Anyways, onto the story. This happened about a year before we moved. I had some stories pop up on Facebook of some traffickers that were targeting women and children at a local store that we lived right behind. I was freaked out, and so I made it a point to not go to that store without my husband. I still got the news articles about people being followed and grabbed and kidnapped from the store, but I felt pretty safe as long as I didn't go anywhere without my husband. I was going to work one day. I worked about 15 minutes away from our house. It was a call center kind of out in the middle of nowhere. There were fields every which way. I worked the afternoon shift and was one of the last people to leave at night. I had to stop and get gas and was a little freaked out because I was scared to go anywhere without my husband. But I wasn't going to make it to work and back home, so I had no choice. I stopped at the station and was slightly relieved that it was super busy. I got out and started pumping my gas when this big van pulled up in the spot next to mine. A guy got out and started pumping his own gas, then he walked around the pump and got in between my car and me. He smiled and said, "Wow, your car is so clean. How do you get it so clean?" I was flabbergasted at the question. My car was a mess. It was dirty with bugs and stuff on it. "Why don't you show me how you get it so clean?" He reached out to touch me, but I jerked back. Another car pulled up behind me and a guy got out. I think he freaked the other guy out because he walked back to his van. I quickly finished pumping my gas and got into my car, locked the doors, and sped away. A few minutes later, I look out my window and the van is behind me, riding my bumper. I could see the guy smiling and laughing with some other guy. I was pretty freaked out, but figured he was just going to the freeway. We passed the freeway, but he kept following me. Now I was very freaked out. The only place on this road now is my work. I called my husband, but he didn't answer since he was at work. I was freaking out, so I just picked up speed and continued to work. I kept looking back and the van was still there, just a little further back. I made it to work. It was a large building with lots of cars in the parking lot. I parked right in front of the doors in a handicap spot and ran inside. I looked back through the locked doors and I saw the guy stooped in front looking pissed. I ran up to my department and went right up to my friend who was ex-military. He carried multiple guns at him at all times. I cried as I told him what had happened. I got to work and was still freaked out all day. We closed and I was walking down to my car. I peeked out the windows and saw the white van. I couldn't see anyone in there and I wasn't even sure it was the same van. I ran back to my department and told my friend what was going on. He pulled out his gun and walked me outside. The van had now moved to right behind my car. My friend walked me to his car. We got in and he drove me right up to my car. He then followed me all the way home and sat outside until I was inside the house. I could see the van following us, but once we got past the freeway, he turned onto it. The next afternoon, on my way to work, I passed the gas station and the van pulled out. Again, they followed me to work, but they turned away once I got to the parking lot. This went on for about a week. They would follow me to work, leave, then be outside when I was leaving, and my friend would walk me out. My buddy told me that they were probably trying to learn my schedule so they could figure out a time to jump me. He insisted I take one of his guns just in case he wasn't there at work to walk me out. I didn't want it though, as I was afraid that if I had it, then I would get pulled over for something and get in trouble for having a gun not in my name and not having a permit for it. I was telling my husband that evening about how this van was still following me, and he suggested that I should call the cops and let them know. I honestly don't know why I didn't think of that. So the next morning, when I was about to get ready for work, I called. I told them everything, then I left for work. Just like clockwork, the van pulled out of the gas station and started following me. We were on the long stretch of road that nothing was on when I spotted a car parked off to the side of the road. I passed it, and then the car passed it, and then the lights came on. The van was pulled over. I later found out that the men following me had several warrants for rape and attempted kidnapping. The back of the van had knives, rope, gloves, masks, chloroform, and some other sketchy crap in it. The cops believed that I was going to be their next target. When I got to work, my friend wasn't there. He was sick. I'm glad I called the cops that morning because I don't think I would have made it home if he wasn't there to walk me out. We have since moved out and live in a not as nice area, but so far I haven't noticed any creepy people around. But I always carry pepper spray whenever I go out.